Dr. Antin to the Travel with Meaning community. What's up, dude?
What's up, Mike? Thanks for having me, dude.
Dude, first off, extraordinary times we're living in. How are you? Your family's okay? Talk to us first.
Yeah, no, I'm lucky. I mean, right now everybody's fine. Day to day things change. We hear about, infection rates doubling every 2 or 3 days in certain cities and parts of the world. But I'm very blessed that, myself and the people around me are in good health.
From the animal side, uh, has it been determined yet? Can animals get this? Are they carriers? And do they understand even what's going on?
Right. Well, to answer the first part of your question, I don't think we know how many animals can get it because, initially it was implicated that it was from wildlife trade in China heavily with bats and some other wildlife. And then, there were some articles that came out showing that maybe pangolins could be a carrier, which are also huge for wildlife trade. That's the most trafficked mammal in the entire world is the pangolin. And those guys are native to Southeast Asia and Africa, and they're really almost gone in Southeast Asia because they've been so overpoached. I read recently, within the last few days, that there's a couple dogs in China that got tested positive.
Really?
And I also, yeah, dogs. And then looking at some of the reports and stuff and news updates coming from some of the primate rescues in Africa, they're not letting anybody new in. And if you leave, you're not coming back for the time being because they're really worried about certain apes getting it, particularly bonobos and probably chimps too. So when we have bats and pangolins, dogs, and primates, of course, including us, that can be affected, I don't think we know how many animals can or cannot, confirm that we can say, oh no, they definitely can't get it or they definitely can. I mean, I would say, that's confined to mammals. I don't know or think it's a problem with reptiles or fish or birds. I don't know for sure. But in terms of the mammal world, which is a big biodiversity of our wildlife and domesticated animals and people, I don't know, man. I don't know if we know. And then how is this affecting animals? I can tell you how it's affecting pets. I'm hearing from so many people, my pets are wanting to be fed more. I'm home all day, so they want to eat more than twice a day. My pets are doing the same thing, and they want to be fed like 4 or 5 times a day. It's ridiculous. So my best advice for pet owners, I have to just throw this in there, don't let your pets get fat. If they want food more often in the day, that's fine, okay? But you need to, at the end of the day, feed the same volume of foods. Each time you feed them, if it's 4 times a day, it's half of what you did when it was 2 times a day, if that makes sense. So just at the end of the day, they're not getting more intake because they're going to get chubby.
Right. And it's such a different time, especially for them. And they can feel that energy and that emotion what people are dealing with, whether it's the stress or not, or
Sure.
what this is.
Absolutely. I mean, you see that even when there's not a global pandemic, epidemic kind of thing going on, just being a veterinarian, when I have patients come in, they can play off their owners. And if you have a really frantic kind of nervous kind of owner, it's not uncommon to see a frantic kind of a pet and vice versa. If you got a really laid back, lax owner, a lot of times those pets are also really mellow and laid back and easy to work with. So just to coincide with what you're saying, yeah, pets definitely feed off our energy. And now it's interesting times because a lot of people that might be prone to having a certain energy when there's a global pandemic are really showing those signs.
You actually said something I really want to ask about because I watched a video of yours online about dogs and home animals really getting like common colds. But I'm curious, do reptiles and like fish, do they get the flu? Is that even common?
Not the same influenza virus per se, but yeah, I mean, like tortoises, for example. At certain times of year, especially in the spring, even in the fall. In the spring and the fall, we see tortoises get like upper respiratory infections. And it's just because they're prone to cold weather and things like that. It's not so much a contagious, communicable thing, but they can get little colds, no doubt. Birds can get respiratory infections. They can be viral, bacterial, fungal in origin. So, and some of those can be contagious, especially in like high population settings or bird pet stores or rescues or whatnot. There's certain diseases we're on the lookout for that are like colds like that.
Right. So as I mentioned in the open, you grew up in Kansas City, but from what I read and what I know, you always had this interesting kind of passion for reptiles and other animals, right? And the best way to really get that research is to kind of get out into the world. Was this experience you talked about in Tanzania. And as I mentioned, even as open, you studied abroad in Tanzania and in Australia. But I saw one of the posts you put for a couple of these pictures in Tanzania, and it seemed like this really was a big, not just turning point, but a meaningful experience for you. Share about Tanzania,
so
share
many
about
ways. I mean, just for the obvious reasons, being somebody from the Western world in a country where we have a lot of luxuries and abilities and technology, and going to a really, I say this with all due respect, but a much more simple or primitive lifestyle, if you will. And this is really fun. So these are some of my favorite pictures from there. You did your homework, man. I love these pictures. So the one in the middle is one of my all-time favorite pictures of any travel I've ever done in my life. And I've been to over 40 countries and been to some pretty crazy places. And so the gentleman next to me on my right, the one also in the middle of the shot, was the son of the community chief. Okay, so he was going to be the chief one day, and I had the good fortune or the luck to when we did this homestay. I was just backing up. We were doing a study abroad. I was in Tanzania with 18 other students, and we were studying ecology conservation and wildlife ecology and stuff. And we did a week-long homestay with this Maasai community near Lake Natron. And Lake Natron is in northern Tanzania. It's this really alkaline lake. There's no life in there. It's just so alkaline. It's so high in the pH scale that nothing can really live there other than maybe some bacteria and stuff, but no big animals live there. Anyways, these people survive in this area, and they can't drink that water or really utilize it. It's just, and you see, we're just in the desert. And man, I mean, living in that boma, it was like natural, they live on the land. And so it's, the thatch roof and the mud walls. And my bed was like a 5 foot long, almost like raised little cot kind of thing. And I was sleeping right next to the goats who were shitting and farting next to me all night. And it was just like such a trip. And so culturally, it was really neat to see how different our lives are and what a day-to-day problem is like for somebody like this compared to our first world problems that we like to call them. And it's very humbling. I mean, I left that whole semester, and to this day, 15 years later almost, I'm thankful every day that I have water on tap that is drinkable and temperature controlled at my disposal anytime I need it. And what a luxury, let alone the fact that I have a vehicle and I can drive, and I have a grocery store with all the food that I would ever want to buy, and I have a kitchen that I can turn on the heat on and off at the switch of a dime. I mean, I don't have to have a fire running constantly. It's just the luxuries we have is extraordinary and so vastly different. Yet at the same time, at the end of the day, what these people really care about as human beings has so much parallels, with so much in common, and there's so many parallels to what we care about as somebody from living near Los Angeles or in the U.S. or in Europe or wherever, Australia. At the end of the day, they care about their family. They like to have fun. They like to laugh. They work hard, and they're human beings. So that was super cool. From the animal perspective, you were talking about reptiles, and stop me if I'm just going on for too long, but this was a really fun. This is a fun moment for me too, and this goes for all different parts of the world. People have different beliefs, but in many parts of Africa and Tanzania and sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of people they have the belief that every lizard, for example, is venomous and deadly. And as you may or may not know, there's no venomous lizards really in the old world. People even say Komodo dragons, but really it's not a venomous thing. That's a whole other story. But in Africa, there's certainly no venomous lizards. And so what I did is I want to show you guys nothing can happen. So I caught this little gecko, and I had a whole crowd, and they're all freaking out, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're crazy, white person, whatever." And I'm like, "No, you guys, I'll let this thing bite me. I'm not going to die. I'll be fine." And so I had this little gecko bite me on the lip, and it was hanging on my face, and they're like screaming and freaking out. I'm like, "You guys, I'm fine." And then when it finally let go, I showed them the gecko's fine. I'm fine. And I don't like stressing out wildlife, but this I felt like was a really good teaching opportunity. At the end of the day, the gecko's fine. It was not, his life will go on and everything will be okay. And the unfortunate thing was, I don't think it changed anything. I think instead of them thinking lizards aren't venomous, they just thought white people are, or this white person is like some kind of witch or something, or is immune to it. And I don't think it changed anything at the end of the day. But, it was fun just getting to interact with them. and live that life for a week and work with their animals and just cook with them and meet them and play with them and play games and everything, and see how the kids go out at night. And like, when they club at night, all the kids in the community, the young adults, they don't have music, they don't have speakers, they don't have electricity, obviously. And so they've got a few people that are clapping, a few people stopping. They've got like a circle, and every, people alternate going in and dancing and jumping around. And it's just like such a trip. But that was the equivalent. That's us going to the club at that age when we're, 18 or 20 or whatever years old, and it was really fun to see those total parallels, but done so in such a different way. For me, one of the most unique travel experiences, because we're talking about travel here, was in this week. So the first day we arrived, because I was living with the chief and his wife and his children, and that gentleman next to me, he got married to a gal I want to say she was like 12 years old, 11 or 12 when they got married, and she was 14 at the time. So culturally, just super fascinating and different. They had this like ceremonial kind of goat slaughter party thing, and it was a means of saying you're welcome in our home, and this is we're celebrating and we're happy to have you. And so I saw some things that I'd never seen before at that point in my life. This is before vet school, this is before a lot of stuff the kind of work that I've done. And they took a goat, and one of the ways that they slaughtered goats was by asphyxiation or suffocating it. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought usually they slit the throat or, something like that in places like this. But what they did, they had literally had one guy, and they had a guy holding the goat's body, another guy giving the goat kind of a headlock, and had his fingers in his nostril. And this is a really gnarly story, and I apologize. Your viewers are probably like, okay, next, sorry. But yeah, it was intense, dude. And I'm watching this goat just struggle to breathe and just be, it was killed. Obviously, that's just kind of how they did it. And the reason they did it that way is because they want to preserve the blood. They don't want to slit his throat, because when they do, they lose so much of that blood, and that's a big part of the diet, and it's used in the cooking and the stews, and they drink it straight up. And so that was, they wanted to preserve that. That's the reason they did it. I didn't know that at the very time. And man, the next, it just got even gnarlier. And pulled out these clots of blood in his hand, and the blood had clotted already in the abdomen, and he gave it to me as if like to do something with it. And then he took his and ate it and just slurped it right up like a little blood jello shot. And I was like, oh, okay. I can't disrespect these guys. They're doing this because I'm here and my friends are here, but I was the only one they really offered this to. And so I did that, and I slurped up little blood clots from a fully slaughtered goat. And that was new for me. And I'm like, okay, cool, we're good. So now we can be friends, and we'll be fine. We'll have some fun.
What the hell did that taste like? Like, really? Like, that's crazy.
I mean, it's irony and like, as you can imagine. And then I thought we were done. And then he reaches into the back of the abdomen. So the kidneys are located kind of along your back. So he reaches all the way in the back of the abdomen, pulls out a fresh, warm goat kidney, and cuts a little slither off of it, like you're cutting like a little chunk of avocado or something, and hands it to me. And I'm like, no. And then he cuts one, starts eating himself. I'm like, oh my God, I've got to, chew down on this like goat kidney. And it was like rubbery and just, it's what you might imagine biting into a fresh kidney's like. And, for me in my culture and where I grew up and that kind of thing, that's just not something that's not common. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And I know it happens in other parts of the world, and, when you travel, you see stuff, but that, for me, that was very new and very intense. But that was, it was like, man, that was my first hour of getting there. And I was like, this is going to be a hell of a week. And
Wait, that was your first hour?
Yeah, we just got there, man. We just got there. They kind of told us where we're staying, and I was with the chief, and we had a little get-together thing and a little celebration. They took the rest of the goat. They made a phenomenal, like all these stews, and they used every part of the animal down to the bones. I mean, it's the most effective, practical, just effective use of a food animal source, and they use all of it.
Did you get sick of all the stuff you ate? The first stuff, like the kidneys and everything else? Did that get you sick at all or not?
No, I was fine. Knowing what I know now, I'd be a little hesitant to eat rural, goat kidney. Just
like a young college kid, whatever. No big deal.
Yeah, with then I didn't know, man. I know too. I've been offered things since then that I've been like, you know what? I'd probably be okay, but it's not worth the risk because I know the thing can be in this tissue, and I'm going to choose not to eat it for that reason.
You're
So yeah.
you're also at a place in your life professionally now. So at that time, you were just a college student. You hadn't gone to vet school. You hadn't really learned what you know now. Do you think that trip, and then I want to get into Australia a little bit. Do you think that actually kind of really led you down that path to be a veterinarian?
So at this point, so I started a business. I was a business major my first year, and then I took a couple bio courses and just I found myself loving to learn and study and explore more. Where I wasn't that kind of student. I wasn't a bad student in high school, but I just did what I had to do to get good grades and get by. I didn't like school. I didn't like going to school. I didn't like tests. I didn't like all that BS. I just did it because you have to do it. And then I was taking this like gem bio and then this evolutionary biology course, and I was just so fascinated by it, and everything was just making so much sense, and I was learning so much and just totally falling in love. And I always had an interest in the back of my mind for medicine, and always thought surgery was really neat. And for a split second, was thinking maybe medical, like a human doctor. And I thought, man, I love animals so much, and I love the sciences, and this is just so cool to me. This is where I belong. This is, business is neat too, and I do find it interesting, but I'm not nearly as passionate about it as I am this other stuff. And so at the end of my first year, maybe the beginning of my second year, somewhere in that's when I switched as to do ecological and evolutionary biology major. And then my Tanzania was my fourth year of undergrad. Australia was third year. So I really wanted to be a vet. These experiences really reinforced working with wildlife, which I always knew I wanted to do. I like exotic animals. I like wildlife. Dogs and cats, grew up with them, love them too. But these experiences, they got my feet wet. And when I went to Australia, that was the first semester abroad. That gave me the travel bug, man. Like I didn't know I liked to travel so much. And there's so many big growth moments from that trip too we can discuss. But that's where it really started, and where I realized, man, I mean, every chance I get moving forward, when I have just enough money and just enough time, I'm seeing the world, and I'm out there. I'm going to faraway lands and seeing species that we don't have nothing like this in North America or in the New World, in the Americas at all. And that was what I was keen on. And those trips definitely, like going to Australia, doing some solo traveling and road tripping, learned a lot. Going to Tanzania.
Where'd you go in Australia? Like, where were you for school?
I was based in Sydney, and I traveled all over that country. I went to Western Australia. I went to the south. I went to the north. I went to the dead center. All up and down the East Coast, where all the Great Barrier Reef and some tourist spots are there. I went to Tasmania. Went to New Zealand for a month. I was just all over the place. Hit Fiji for a week on the way home for some great diving and some manta ray stuff. But yeah, I just had a super incredible time there. And Australia's neat. So like their school system, basically, when you finish classes, they give you a month to study for finals. It's not just like back to back. It's like you have this gap of time to like just buckle down and get ready for your finals. And to me, that was an opportunity to explore this country some more. And so I flew clear across the other side of the country. Sydney's in like the southeast. So I went to Western Australia, flew into a town called Broome, and then rented a car and went to Exmouth. And that's where you can swim with whale sharks. And this has been on my bucket list ever since I knew what they were. Then I wanted to see these things. Anyways, that turned into a 3-week road trip, traveling all over national parks and just seeing some of Australia's natural, incredible beauty and gorges and waterfalls in the Kimberley, which is the northwest, going to the dead center, which is like Ayers Rock and Uluru. You see a big rock in the middle of the desert, Ayers Rock? Yeah. So that, and there's some other cool natural features there. Going up north to near Darwin, so there's really cool national parks, tons of crocodiles and reptiles.
Kakadu, right?
You're seeing, what's that?
It's called Kakadu National Park is up there.
Kakadu, exactly. Kakadu and Litchfield, gorgeous waterfalls. I mean, it's like the Everglades on crack. Kakadu, It's all these big, broad wetlands, and you cruise around at night, and you're just going to find tons of reptiles, which is like, that's heaven for me. So I did that on my own and navigated on my own, and at that time, I hadn't done anything like that. So that's like, I learned I like to travel alone. I like to travel with people too, but I'm very comfortable being by myself and exploring on my own, and I get to do it on my own time. And there's no other. I can do what I want, when I want, how I want, and there's nobody else to play a part of that, which I really like, and I like the alone time. And so I just stocked up on canned food and water and just cheap stuff, threw it in the trunk because I was going to be in the middle of nowhere for hundreds of miles at a time, and barely communicating or seeing anybody because it's just so desolate there. especially in between some of these locations. And that's actually when I realized, up until that point, I wanted to be a vet. When I did that trip, I brought out a camcorder and a tripod, and I started making these educational videos on some of the animals I caught. And so the first animal I caught in some water was this big, 5-foot long sand monitor, which is a big lizard. And I made this like educational video talking about its natural history, its adaptations, and how cool they are, and showing it, and its big mouth, and it's trying to bite my face off, and it's just nuts. And I did it with several other animals, and I saw along the way, and like that's where I realized I wanted, I was so inspired by Steve Irwin. I was in his home country, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to like bring wildlife awareness and education in a bigger way. And I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know what I was going to do with that footage, but I just knew that's what I wanted to do, and that's where I was going to start making it happen. And everywhere I traveled thereafter, that was a part of my MO. And I was bringing a camera and looking for wildlife and trying to talk about it and their what's neat about them, or their evolution, or their adaptations, or their conservation, status, whatever. That was a big driver for me with my traveling.
Well, let's talk about something there for 2 seconds. So you had that idea in your mind that you're going to shoot content just for yourself, but also to share educationally with everyone, let everyone know like about these species, reptiles, what you're catching. Steve Irwin was obviously, as you said, like a huge inspiration, not only just for you as a professional, but you were in Australia. You talked about just being in the middle of the bush, catching all these reptiles. Did you have any crazy encounters where did you get bit by anything? Or like, I mean, that's pretty gnarly just to be out in those places by yourself.
No, I mean, I was young and hungry at that time. I remember my last night on that road trip, I was up in Kakadu, and I was like, this is my last chance to really get close and maybe even get my hands on a saltwater crocodile. And I found some smaller ones that would be more manageable, like 3 to 4 foot. I mean, that's still, they can rip you up, don't get me wrong, but they're not going to pull you underwater and munch on you like the bigger ones would. And it was my last night. I had to fly out the next morning. This is my last chance. I'm leaving Australia like the next, within a few days after that. The trip's almost over. And I was so hungry to find one. I found myself like, shoulder deep almost in crocodile infested water. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm going to get killed. I'm going to die. Oh my God, I lost my head. Like, this is nuts. So that was the craziest thing I'd say that I did. And that was just me being an idiot and young and just too hungry for my own good. But yeah, I mean, I got bit by some little snakes and stuff and little lizards, but nothing super sketchy. I mean, I was really responsible with always having gas in the tank. I hit a kangaroo, which sucked. You drive at night out there, you're not going to not hit something. It's just inevitable, I've learned, and people warn you. And this little joey, it sucked, man. This mom and this joey were, on the road, and I stopped, and we were good, and I didn't have anti-lock brakes in this little POS little sedan thing. And I'm just skidding, and they ran off. I'm like, oh, thank God. And then the joey ran back in the lights at the last second, got smacked, and just went flying. And I had to make sure he was totally dead. But like, that was a bummer. It broke my heart to go out there to appreciate wildlife, and at the same time end up, being responsible for the death of one. It makes me feel. Luckily, kangaroos are not a conservation concern. There's way more than enough of them. So if it was like a really endangered animal, that would tear at me more. And it wasn't easy then. I'd never euthanized animals. I wasn't a vet yet. It was a tough night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's part of the,
In regards to Australia, because Australia is such a fascinating place to kind of, I'd say, pop your cherry as far as like a big travel, because it has almost everything for you, what you want. It has a great city, it has great people, and it has such just interesting wildlife. I'd be
Absolutely. Really so different. They speak English, and culturally, it's not as different than what I'm used to. So it's a really great place to get introduced.
Yeah, well said. It's actually where I left, and after I was a talent agent, I bought a one-way ticket, and that's where I went first. Just never been there. It just seemed like a good place to go.
Oh yeah, right on, man. That's super cool.
Spent almost a year traveling.
Were you in Sydney, or were you in the West or the East, or what?
Everywhere. Yeah, I landed in Melbourne and ended up going out to Uluru, starting in Darwin, coming down,
all right,
to Cairns, all the way down to Sydney. Yeah, it was. I'm not as daring as you. I wasn't like out looking to catch animals. I was probably looking
most people are
other things. And it was an amazing experience. The people, everything about it was just, Australia has such a special place in my heart.
Me too, man. That's exactly how I look at it. So I have to say, I just went back for the first time a couple months ago, or not even. a month ago or something. And I just wanted to help out with the wildlife after all the fires, because there's still a lot of wildlife super affected. The fires are out, but the problems aren't over by a long shot. So that was super cool. I'm getting to work with some of the animals I've never laid hands on before, like Tasmanian devils and koalas and all these neat marsupials. But one of the most special moments was actually going to the Australia Zoo and getting to meet Steve Irwin's family. I got to meet Terry Irwin. I was like starstruck. So I watched her and Steve, of course, growing up, and then meet the Bindi and Robert, their kids, and Bindi's husband Chandler. And it was just so cool. We super hit it off. They follow my work, and they were such nice things to say. And I have so much respect for the awareness and the efforts they make towards conservation and their work in the public eye. They're just super incredible, and they're every bit as nice in person as you can imagine. And that was like a full circle moment for me, because it was 14 years later. I had these big dreams to be like Steve Irwin. I'm not saying I'm Steve Irwin, but I try to get myself out there and raise awareness and get people excited about animals. And then getting to meet, the family of that inspired me, and the family of the man that inspired me was like just super special. Just kind of, it's super full circle for me. It was really cool.
Very much so, even being back in Australia as well. You mentioned that from those first Australia trips, and I don't know if you did it as much in Tanzania, where you had the camera and you were explaining about wildlife and everything.
Totally. Yeah.
So then you go on, you become a vet, you start, working that profession and doing that. Curious, this big career kind of shift thing came from you then when the People magazine came out, right? So we got these images came out. How did that come to be? You're now in People magazine listed as one of the sexiest beast charmer, right?
Yeah, in 2014 they reached out and they're like, "Hey, I think they saw some YouTube videos or something." I've asked them, and I at the time, and I never heard back on that, so I don't 100% know how they found me, but I'm assuming it was YouTube. I wasn't big on social media at this point or anything. And they're like, "Hey, we're doing this segment in our SMA, our Sexiest Man Alive issue, and we're covering men at work." And so I was in this section with the sexiest chef and the sexiest teacher and the sexiest a couple other dudes. I forget specifically what they do. And it's funny. I was the only one where I was at that time the sexiest beast charmer, which isn't even a profession. But it was so fun and funny, and like I couldn't turn it down. I was like, "This is fun, it's cool. It's what I do." And it's I was in Brazil in the Pantanal, with the car came in the middle of Brazil. So yeah, that was really fun. Luckily, I was in it a couple other times, and they actually called me the sexiest veterinarian. Luckily, so I felt like, okay, this is a real thing.
Beast charmer was just perfect name. So that then opened all these avenues for you in the TV world. Doing appearances like on the Today Show or Kris Jenner, where you're coming in with these exotic animals, right?
That definitely got some media and definitely helped. I'd actually done a couple shows or a few shows before then. I was on, the first show I ever did was a Kris Jenner show.
Oh.
And they found me through, I had an agent at the time that I connected with, and she was more focused on news stuff, but she had my name on some list of animal stuff, and they saw some of my work and found me, and they had me on for like a 13-minute segment. I got to talk about 5 animals in studio, and it was, oh my God, I'd never been so nervous in my life the first time being on camera in an audience, and it was just nuts. I did that, and then I did a show called, it was like a follow-up show to Naked and Afraid, a Discovery show. It was called Naked After Dark. And so they have different people come on. They had me as an animal expert to talk about some of the wildlife native to Bolivia, which was where an episode took place. And I had my clothes on. It wasn't like anything naked, but I got to talk about some cool Bolivian wildlife. And then, maybe another show or two. And then, the People thing came out. And then a year after that is when I went viral on social media. And that really picked things up too. Like you ever heard of Bored Panda? They're like a digital publication. They do all kinds of stories. They did a piece on me without me knowing the day I hit 10,000 followers. And I put out like a post saying, "Oh, I'm so stoked that 10,000 people are following my work and like animals, and this is super cool." And the next day I hit 15,000. I was like, this isn't typical. Something's going on. And then some people shared the article, and then BuzzFeed reached out, and Huffington Post, and some magazines. And then once they did their story and an interview with me where they actually asked me questions and everything, it took off, and it's not the most insane viral growth, but it was pretty cool. I mean, going from 10,000 to like 220,000 in a couple of weeks was super exciting.
Well, I think it's super exciting, but also let's go back to the authenticity of it, right? You're just doing what you do and loving what you love. And I think that is a key component to what happens in social media. I think there's the people who are, kind of BS and they're out there influencing on some level. But people like yourself who actually have this incredible profession and skill set that you do that, ride this train and get to grow through social media and be able to have a bigger reach.
Absolutely. I mean, I will. I mean, it's one of the biggest blessings I've ever had in my entire life.
Interesting.
Was that, and that's opened so many doors and opportunities, and opened more doors and more opportunities. So it's been so incredible to have that. And yeah, it's all, it's all, my followers are organic, and I do what I do and I love it. And I did start social media hoping that I could get more outreach and awareness this way. I wasn't expecting to go viral per se, but it's been an absolute blessing.
Cool. Well, obviously then from some of these TV segments, and you said you had an agent and people working with you, and, then Animal Planet comes to you, and I know you've done a lot of other TV things here and there, but, Evan Goes Wild. And, I was reading one of the Animal Planet executives, and they were talking about, is he just some guy who became a vet because the actor thing didn't happen? And I loved what I know, right? But I loved what the executive said, and I'm not even gonna give this person's name out, but they were basically like, oh, that's what we thought too, until you talk to him and you hear the passion for what he's doing. And I want to talk about Evan Goes Wild because in reading what they even had it described as, someone who loves to travel, but someone who loves animals, it seems like this would have been like the dream job aspect for you. Basically, it's the chasing the wildlife bucket list, right? That was the whole concept.
This show, it was my dream show. I mean, this is what I wanted to be doing when I started filming, picking up a camera and putting it on a tripod, using my headlights as a light source at night when I'm catching reptiles on the road in Australia 14 years prior to this show. This was the dream. This was a huge part of my motivation. And like I said, growing up with Steve Irwin and being inspired by him and Jeff Corwin and those guys, like, just absolutely loved it. I wanted to do something like that. This would be, I mean, they do so much in raising awareness on wildlife and getting people excited and educated about them on such a big scale that I wanted to be a part of that. And so, yeah, I mean, that was, I mean, to have a show on Animal Planet, I mean, that was the dream. And then it was actually coming real, becoming a reality, a decade and a half later almost. I guess it was 13 years later. And it was so fun, and it was everything I wanted it to be. And I wish we had a season 2 going on, but their directions change, and I think their executives are different. Some of the executives I worked with are not there, and things change, and it's great. I love Animal Planet. I'd love to work with them again. No hard feelings or sour feelings whatsoever. They're great people, but yeah, no, it was incredible. I mean, every episode's in a different country. I mean, this is what I do. Even when I don't have a production team following me for a show. I mean, when we spoke, I can imagine I know who you spoke with or who said that about me, because I remember when I had the first conversation with them regarding this show, and I've spoken to them before. I've worked towards a show many times and gotten closer and closer and not happened, and this finally happened. I remember saying, yeah, I just got back from South Africa. And like, oh, why were you there? I was like, I had time, and it's a self-funded trip. It's not for any brand or show or anything. It's just I love doing this stuff, and I love working with these animals, and these are the animals I was working with, and this is what we were doing, and this is why we were doing it, and this is why it's important. And I think that really sold it and resonated, because this is what I do, and I will do this whether or not I have a show. Now, I went to Australia. That was my money and my time. That wasn't for a show. That wasn't for anything but just me doing what I love, and I always will, whether or not it's for somebody else or for myself. It's always going to happen. And I'm too passionate about, to not do it.
And that's truly what I dig about you, dude, honestly. But I do want to ask about a few of these episodes, because if you read the descriptions, it seems like, how could you pick a favorite? I don't want you to come up with a favorite, but I'm just going to share like just some of the descriptions, swimming with humpback whales in Tahiti, or caving with bats and snakes in the Philippines, or crocs in the Yucatan. Like, dude, like, again, it seems like your dream scenario. Did you have one or two that really stand out as far as episodes you're like, holy crap, this actually got to happen? And
every episode has such special, exciting, memorable, just incredible moments. I mean, swimming with whales, it was on my bucket list, man. I mean, that's like they're in the group of the biggest animals in the history of the earth.
Mm.
Not humpback whale specifically, but I mean, man, when you're in the water with a 40+ foot whale and her calf, and you're just swimming right next to them, it's a trip. It's unreal, and it's so incredible to just see them and be with them and have almost scary moments with them when they're coming to breach right towards you, and you have to move out of the way at the last minute because not that they would intentionally hurt you, but just an animal of that sheer size can just be so dangerous for a, something my size relative. I mean, on the bottom left there, you got a picture of the binturongs. That's super special. I love binturongs. I think they're such neat, weird animals. We got to be a part of a rescue where mother was poached, and her 3 little binturong cubs, I forget what the baby name for them is, but these little binturong babies were about to be sold in the legal wildlife market. And so our producers were like, hey, how can we intervene? What can we do? And there was a price on it, which can sometimes fuel the wildlife stuff, but we had to get these bear cats out of there. And so we got to rescue 3 little baby, like 6-week-old little binturongs. And they look like a little baby version of what's on my shoulder there. And it was just, that was really special getting to help those guys out.
I'm
I
going
mean,
to ask you a quick question because
like
these episodes, again, I know for TV, but I'm just curious from like, do you have one moment that stands out for you from your rescues or from your episodes or anything that really is memorable for you? I mean, it seems like everything you do has got like that kind of wow factor. Like, well, I can't believe like you keep upping the game as far as animals you get to work with. But do you have something that really sticks out to you? Because I can keep going through the Instagram stuff that I have too.
No, they all have so many special things, and everywhere I go, I've been so lucky over the years, and I've just had these encounters, whether it be purely in the raw wild or with really cool people doing really cool things. I mean, the rhino work, I would say that was a little bit of a game changer for me, because this rhino organization that does anti-poaching efforts and rhino rescue and orphan rescue for, when rhinos are poached for their horns, just, I'm sure you know a little bit about this, but the legal rhino horn trade is the most expensive commodity in the black market, and these horns sell when they're in their final destination for upwards of $200,000 per kilogram. So rhinos are being poached like crazy. Like, we're not going to have any more in 10 years if it continues, kind of thing. It's really, really bad. This organization reached out. I never worked with rhinos. Like, hey, we just want to host you. We want to have you out. We want to show you what we do. And we would love for you to bring awareness to this cause and just see what this conservation kind of thing is really all about, because there's nowhere else in the world than it's quite like this here in Africa. And it was in South Africa. That opened a new world for me. And it was just seeing, the animals was an amazing thing in itself, because I'm meeting rhino orphans and they're like dogs, and you give them belly rubs and they flop on their backs, and the adults are so big and beautiful and just truly, I mean, it's cliche, but they're so majestic. I mean, they're so incredible. But the people were really what blew me away, because no joke, these people, it's not just, and not that this is still a big thing to invest all your time, energy, money, sink it everything into this conservation effort, whether it's a habitat or a species and whatever that you believe in. But these people not only do that, they put their lives on the line, man. I mean, they all are ready for firefights.
Wow.
Like gun shooting firefights, like they are ready to die for what they believe in, for these animals. And when I saw that kind of passion, it was like, holy shit, man, these people are the real deal. And this organization that I first worked with, called Rhino 911. And when I met the co-founder and his family, and I stayed with them, and the gal that invited me out was another American, same kind of story. She went out and she had a connection and ended up going out there, and her whole life changed. And she devotes everything to it. Her name's Jamie, and she's such a special woman. And she does the work she has to do at home just to pay the bills, and then she gets to South Africa all the time, and she's making big moves to, really, really help the species. And you just see what people sacrifice to help what they believe as to be important conservationally and an important part of Africa's iconic, species and their heritage. It was mind-blowing. And that's why Africa's been such an important, part of the world for me the last couple of years. And I've been to probably 10 countries in the last 2 or 3 years. And been there probably 8 or 9 times, and just working with different, whether it's primate people or rhino people, whatever. I mean, these people put their lives on the line. I mean, I work with a guy, and he's a pilot rescuing chimps, and this guy has literally hundreds of pictures of guys with, AKs and stuff shooting his helicopter, and he's just an absolute savage. And this guy, he's not armed and he's not military. He wants to rescue these animals and he believes in it and he puts his life on the line. When you see that kind of passion, that's an eye opener.
Wow. I saw also again on your Instagram about a recent trip you took where was it Uganda with the giraffe rescue and helping with the giraffe
Yeah,
as well. That looked pretty remarkable.
dude, that's nuts. So that sticks out in terms of how risky it is for the people and the animals involved for doing that kind of game capture. I've done a bit of game capture, actually. I've been lucky. I've gotten to do game capture with a lot of different antelopes and hoofstock and zebras and rhinos in Africa, and I've not done a giraffe yet. And what it takes to get those animals is pretty intense. You have to overdose them heavily with sedatives, with the drugs, to get them to go down quickly so you can actually keep up with them and get them. And then as soon as you get to them, you reverse the drugs that you gave, and the only things keeping this giraffe in place when it's down on its side is manpower. And so there's 8 people or so on the body, there's 4 to 5 people along the neck just keeping it stabilized. And it's extremely risky for people. I almost got kicked in the face by a giraffe. I didn't realize their range of motion in their feet. I was giving injections up by the neck and the back foot on that same side was inches from my face. I'm like, holy shit. Like, that was my second giraffe, and I was like, this out of 10 giraffe, and that's when I realized, man, there's no slack in here. You slack and you get hurt.
Yeah, that whole thing, and I totally encourage people to check out your Instagram for that, because that whole video was interesting, just to watch even the process of like when the giraffe came up and how they had to kind of let it like calm down for a moment and then lead him to the truck. I thought it was fascinating, actually.
Yeah, we got these different ropes, as you saw. You got one at the base. There's so we cover their eyes and their ears to reduce stress, and believe it or not, it really significantly reduced stress almost across the board working with wildlife, crocodiles, deer, giraffe, whatever. And then we have a little harness with a little carabiner and then a rope attached, and that's at the base of the neck under the face mask, the eye cover. We plug their ears, of course, and then we have these 2 other ropes that are at the base of the neck, on the other side of the neck, that go into the arms, and that kind of just lead them to kind of walk forward once they're more willing to do so. At first, they want to buck around. Some of them are more cooperative than others. Some of them really need time to let out their steam. And then we eventually walk into a trailer, and that whole thing, I mean, giraffes, like many wildlife, are very neophobic, meaning they're just anything new, it's scary to them. It's dangerous. So when they step on a metal object and it sounds like it's got the sound of the metal scares the shit out of them. And so the whole thing was just such an adventure. But the team there kicked butt. It was the Uganda Wildlife Authority, which is basically their federal like fish and game authority, and then the Giraffe Conservation Foundation is where the people.
Rad video. I really like the video. It's good. You've talked quite a bit about crocs and whatnot, and I want to pull this up because I think this is the Philippines.
That's right.
Cool. Tell me about that, and like, again, I know you're just like passionate about reptiles, but what is it with these animals? And what are you doing here in the Philippines?
So crocs, because I've always had this inexplicable fascination for them. They're modern day dinosaurs. Different species have been around upwards of 150 to 200 million years, some of the species. So they've survived all these different extinctions, mass extinctions. I find them to be beautiful and fascinating. They look like dinosaurs. I love their lifestyle as ambush predators. They have such a freaky bite force. They can hold their breath for hours. I mean, just every adaptation about them is like, if it's not broke, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's evolutionarily what I'm talking about. They've been the same unchanged evolutionary for tens to hundreds of millions of years, and they're just so stunning to me. I mean, they just look like one of the most intense, hardcore, badass creatures on the planet, and I just love them. What I'm doing here in the Philippines is in northern Luzon. It's the same island that Manila's on, and then on the other side of the island in the north. And my best friend Joey, we have a ton in common. We both partied and played sports in high school and got the good grades and do what we needed to do. But once we got to college, we really started kind of, feeding into our passions. So he was a reptile keeper at the San Diego Zoo, working with venomous snakes and crocodiles for 5 years. He just got his master's in crocodile conservation work, which is what this trip was involved with. And anywhere he goes, I like to just meet him up there at least for a week or so and hang out, see what his work is, get my hands on it. So we did a trip in the Fiji, working with the Fijian crested iguanas, which is one of the most endangered lizards in the world, between 1 to 200 of the species in the entire world. This crocodile species, the Philippine croc, is the most endangered crocodile in the world. There's maybe 200 of them in the wild, maybe a little more after some of the work Joey's done. But he was doing, diet surveys, breeding surveys, conservation work, tracking them with satellite and telemetry, and just just really getting a lot of knowledge on the species up in this area, where it's one of the few places in the entire world you can find them now. And that was, yeah, that was on the right, where it's just me and the crocodile. That was a female we just caught in a trap, and we were doing a diet study on. So we'd flushed her stomach to see what she had been eating. And this little side note I found very interesting: a major part of their diet was snails. So it's really neat to see this animal that's regarded as being such a fierce, gnarly, just merciless predator, is actually a very casual consumer and just picks off snails. And that was a huge part of their diet, and I didn't know that, and I thought that was super neat. And then getting to hang out with these kids was super special, because a lot of people have misconceptions about crocodiles and what they impose on their properties and their dangers and this and that. But the species, they don't grow up to be man-eaters. I mean, they could eat a small child. A full-grown one grows up to be 3 meters at biggest. That's biggest. And then you rarely get to be that big in this area or anymore now, because of what's alive out there. But they're not that kind of crocodile. They really just avoid people. And just getting to share them with kids and get them excited was super cool. And what I love about this area, and what Joey's involved in this, is called the Mabuwaya Foundation. They're all about incorporating the community in their conservation. And it's just a little side note, and this is huge when it comes to conservation. There's really 3 things for successful, sustainable conservation. One is science. You got to prove it with science and research, and why is this species important, this habitat, whatever. The other one's security. How are we going to protect them? And the other one that you cannot forget, that a lot of people do, is community. You have to make it, you have to find a way, and there's many ways to do this. You have to find a way to make it where these animals or this habitat is worth more to the people living on or near it when it's alive or intact than it is not. We need to make it so these people benefit more from these animals being alive than they do from poaching them and that kind of thing. So that's what it comes down to make it, to help get the community involved. But they changed the school mascot to crocodiles. They have crocodile parties. They get the kids in to see the baby crocodiles at the Head Start facility, where they raise them from an egg to 2 years old before they release them, so they're less vulnerable to other wild predators at young ages. And they just do incredible work. So that was a really special, cool experience to see conservation at work.
The reason I want to ask you about this one is, this was Turkey, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said, like, on this top right picture of this tortoise, you said you just found it kind of wandering around, right?
Yeah.
I just found that to be fascinating.
Oh, it was so cool. So most of my trips are like in the tropics, or involving wildlife, even if they're not in the tropics. But I love culture and nature as well. And so that in that top right with that tortoise, that was an area called Pamukkale, and it's this crazy, like, super high concentration of calcium in the water flowing down these mountains, and they form these like snow white like little terraces of pools, and it's just like nothing I've ever seen before. And it's not snow. It looks like snow, but it's not. It's just calcium. It's very warm. You can swim in them. They're warm, and they're like these high mineral freshwater streams that just form these like white clouds on the mountains. They're super pretty. I think it translates to like white, like cotton hills or something, is what Pamukkale stands for, something like that. And I was just scoping out a ruin. That was a ruin. It was I forget what goddess. It was Athena or something like that, and I should remember. But I just found that guy wandering. I was like, dude, how cool is this? This is a Greek tortoise in its native habitat, being a normal Greek tortoise, living the dream on these ancient, thousands of years old ruins. And I mean, what a trip to have this like wildlife and nature and history and culture all accumulate in one special moment. So that was super cool.
Yeah, it felt like it culminated for you in that moment right there. Just
it was everything. And my smile was, man, I was just cheek to ear to ear, just so happy. And the bottom right was Istanbul. So that was one of the mosques. That was the, oh my gosh, I don't think it was Sophia. It was that big mosque next to it. And then the other one was in the middle of the country. That's an area called Cappadocia. And from the history there, that's where I saw some of the oldest ruins I've seen in my life. And they have caves there that are 4,000 to 5,000 BC. So I'm seeing like 6,000 to 7,000 year old stuff. And it's good and bad, because they're not super protected in a way that like anybody can walk up to them and in them. So that's cool, because you get to see so much more. But the downside is, you got these assholes that think it's fun to go graffiti or vandalize them, which is just it's like shitting on our history. It's shitting on the whole planet's culture and heritage to go put graffiti on something that's thousands of years old. But the landscape, as you can see, is stunning. and the communities that live there for thousands of years built some crazy stuff into those rocks. It was really cool.
Travel mean to you?
Travel to me means, I mean, stepping outside of your confined reality in your box and getting perspective on what the rest of the world is. And for me, that's been heavily involved with wildlife, with some culture and history and fun foods and stuff too. But it's seeing what the rest, what it's getting perspective is what it is. And if I had to say it in short.
All right. Well done. All right, so here's how we're gonna play the speed round. Get my timer here. We're gonna put 60 seconds or so on the clock. We're not judging.
Okay.
You. It's all right. Let me get my timer ready. Oh, I think we can hear Barbara in the background barking. So
yeah.
I mean, here she's probably a little disappointed that she knew we had it. Yep, Animal Planet. He's on Animal Planet. Relax. She's super excited. Okay, and we're gonna start the timer here. I love how she's just barking. This is great. All right, and timer, 60 seconds. Sorry. All right, starting now. What is your current country count?
Current, 44 or so.
Place you still want to visit?
Ooh, Madagascar.
Place you tell people to visit?
Indonesia.
Window or aisle?
Aisle these days. I was window up until like a year or two ago. Now I'm very aisle.
Okay, mountains or beach?
Beach.
Airbnb or hotel?
Often neither, but I probably do more in hotels, to be honest.
Boat or train?
Oof. Oh, I've done a lot more boats.
Scuba dive, skydive?
Scuba. I love both, but scuba, man. I do that all over the world.
Sunrise, sunset?
I'm not a morning person.
Well done. World Cup, World Series?
Oh, man. Super Bowl. MMA. I don't know. I don't really follow either. And soccer's so big around the world. So if I had to pick, I guess soccer over baseball.
Animal you still want to find in the wild?
King Cobra.
Okay. Do you collect anything from each location you visit?
I do. Machetes. I love, and I collect them from people, like real working ones. I don't buy tourist ones. Like whoever I was out bushwhacking with, I offer to buy their machete.
Oh, interesting. The thing you need on a flight?
Ooh, for me, it's honestly my phone. I like to be productive when I'm sitting and going nowhere. So these days you can do a lot on the phone.
Best travel lesson?
Best travel lesson. Always bring toilet paper. Always.
Very, very important these days. Favorite national park?
Oh, man. Komodo National Park, special spot for me.
Favorite airline?
Ooh, domestic, I really like JetBlue. International, I had an incredible flight on Emirates and Qatar. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Favorite food?
I really love good like Middle Eastern food. I was in Jordan recently. Oh my God, I was just out of control.
Favorite place in the world?
Southeast Asia.
Well done. All right, that's the end of our speaker.
Yeah, the wildlife and the culture and the wildlife is so exotic and different from what we have in the New World in the Americas. So to me, from my perspective, it's so different because they have so much just things that we just don't have or see here when it comes to the nature, the wildlife, the mountains, the people, the foods, everything. It's just so different.
Wow. And you had mentioned, you're obviously a big diver. Do you have a favorite dive spot or an experience?
One of my favorites actually was Southern Great Barrier Reef and Lady Elliot Island. It's like a mile wide diameter, and it's just, they got whales migrating through part of the year. They've got tons of sharks, tons of big stuff, tons of little stuff. Indonesia's got phenomenal diving.
Thank you very much, dude, especially with everything going on in the world. And thank you so much. So people, let's thank Dr. Evan Antin. Welcome him to the Travel with Meaning community. And hopefully we'll see everyone on the open road very soon. Peace.
Cheers.